The first snow of January had a way of swallowing sound in Pine Hollow. The streets lay empty, the little clapboard houses huddled under soft caps of white, and the only movement was the curl of chimney smoke rising into the pale morning sky. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, their notes carrying through the frozen air. Walter Briggs stood on the porch of his cabin, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. At 72, his mornings were slow and quiet, built on the steady rhythm of habit. Chop the wood. Stoke the stove. Feed the songbirds that gathered in the bare maple by the fence. Once he had been a forest ranger, a man of long hikes, sudden storms, and the deep hush of backcountry trails. But that life had shifted 5 winters ago when Marjorie, his wife of nearly 50 years, passed in her sleep. Since then, the cabin had felt a little bigger, the nights a little longer, and the silence a little heavier. Walter pulled on his wool coat and stepped into the snow, the crunch under his boots sharp in the stillness. He was heading toward the general store, a place where he could exchange a few words with old friends, maybe hear the latest gossip, and pick up flour for bread. Halfway down Main Street, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the calm. Sarah Miller, cheeks flushed from the cold and from something sharper, fear, came running toward the small knot of townsfolk outside the post office. "Ethan's gone," she blurted, her voice shaking. "He was playing in the yard, and now, I can't find him. I've searched everywhere." Walter felt the air change around them. In Pine Hollow, a missing child in winter was no small thing. Snow could cover tracks in minutes. Cold could steal warmth from a body in hours. Somewhere in the back of his mind, instincts long unused began to stir. Walter's boots crunched through the snow as he followed Sarah to the edge of her property. A line of spruce trees marked the end of the yard, their dark needles heavy with frost. The low wooden fence there was half buried in drifts, the boards brittle with ice. "He's small, Walter," Sarah said, her breath visible in ragged bursts. "He wouldn't go far. Not in this cold." Walter crouched near the fence, scanning the snow. At first he saw nothing, just the smooth, wind-swept white. Then the shape revealed itself, a child's boot print, half filled with fresh flakes, pointing toward the forest. Beside it, another impression. Larger. Rounder. 4 toes. A paw. He brushed away the snow for a clearer look. The pads were deep, the claws distinct, not the size of a dog's, but larger. He'd seen prints like these before, years ago. Black bear. Winter wanderer. The tracks moved together, small boots, big paws, both heading into the trees. Sarah's hand found her mouth. "Oh my God." "It doesn't mean harm," Walter said quietly, though even he wasn't certain. A bear this close to town in midwinter wasn't ordinary. Either food was scarce, or something had disturbed it from its den. He rose, eyes narrowing toward the shadowed tree-line. The forest beyond was a world of muted greens and white silence, but Walter knew it could turn dangerous fast. Wind snaked through the branches, scattering snow like drifting smoke. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted, an echo of the ranger he'd once been. "I'll follow the trail," he told Sarah. "You gather a search party. Tell them to stay back until I call." Without waiting for her reply, Walter swung a canvas pack over his shoulder and stepped past the fence. The snow swallowed the sound of his footsteps as he followed the twin set of prints into the waiting dark of Pine Hollow forest. The forest closed around Walter like a heavy door swinging shut. Within a dozen paces, the wind faded to a faint hiss, muffled by the thick drape of snow on the pines. The air smelled of resin and cold earth, sharp in his lungs. The tracks were easy to follow here. The child's boots sank deep, the bear's paws even deeper, scattering powder with each step. They wound between the trees in a steady line, as though neither hurried nor hesitated. That was strange. Bears didn't usually escort anything. Walter paused, listening. The forest was still, no birds, no creak of branches. Just the muted thud of his heartbeat in his ears. Somewhere far ahead, a branch snapped. Not loud. Not close. But enough to quicken his breath. He remembered the first time he tracked a bear in winter, 15 years ago, when a desperate mother had wandered too close to a logging camp. He'd learned then that a bear could vanish like mist if it wanted to. But this one wasn't hiding. It was leaving a trail bold enough for anyone to see. Walter tightened his scarf against the cold and kept moving. Shadows thickened. Snow fell from a high branch and landed on his shoulder, sending a shiver down his back. The deeper he went, the more the forest felt like it was holding its breath. He stopped again at a small clearing where the prints circled. The boots stood in one place for a while, a small shuffle, maybe pacing. The bear tracks moved around them, overlapping, protective. His gut tightened. "They're together," he murmured to himself. But why? From somewhere ahead came a low resonant sound. Not a growl. Not quite. More like a deep rumble, vibrating in the cold air. Walter's hand went instinctively to the old flare gun in his pack. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder and stepped forward, following the trail into the denser dark, toward whatever waited beneath the forest's snow-heavy canopy. Walter emerged from the tangle of pines into an open space, and for a moment, the sudden brightness startled him. The clearing was a shallow bowl of untouched snow, glinting in the pale winter light. But there was something wrong. The tracks that had been so clear, the boots and the massive paw prints, stopped dead at the edge of the clearing. Just ended. No fade, no scatter, no sign of doubling back. Walter crouched, frowning. He brushed away the top layer of powder, expecting to find a hard ice crust or maybe a trick of light. Nothing. Just undisturbed snow, soft and clean. He scanned the tree line. The pines stood still, heavy with snow, their dark needles like watchful eyes. No movement. No sound but his own breath. He checked the other side of the clearing, no exit trail. If they had crossed, they'd done it without leaving a single mark. That made no sense. A gust of wind swirled loose flakes into the air, and for a second he thought he saw something, a shadow slipping between two trees on the far side. His pulse kicked. He took one slow step forward, his boot sinking deep with a crunch that sounded far too loud in the silence. Then in that same silence, something brushed the edge of his hearing, a sound almost too soft to name. Not quite a growl, not quite a hum. Low. Steady. Present. Walter's instincts told him to move, but not toward the sound. Toward cover. He backed toward the nearest pine, eyes locked on the far side of the clearing. The forest felt different here, charged, as though every tree was leaning in to listen. The wind shifted again. This time, it carried a faint, unmistakable scent, musk, earth, and something wild. The bear was still here. And so, he guessed, was the child. Walter's breath plumed in the cold air, each exhale loud in the crushing silence. Then, movement. From the far side of the clearing, a shape slid out from the pines. Massive. Dark. Shoulders rolling with slow, deliberate power. Snow clung to its fur in thick patches, glistening like frost on iron. The bear. Walter froze, every muscle locked. His hands tightened on the strap of his satchel, the only thing between him and panic. The animal's head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring, as if weighing his scent against its memory. For a moment, the two of them simply stared. Man. Bear. Both unwilling to move first. Then something shifted in the shadows behind the bear, a flash of color. A red scarf. The child. Standing in the tree lean, wide-eyed, clutching the scarf to their chin. Walter's heart slammed. He stepped forward, careful, slow, boots sinking into the snow. "It's okay," he whispered, not sure if he was speaking to the child or the bear. The bear's head dropped a fraction, a low rumble in its chest. Not a roar, a warning. Walter stopped. He could feel the line between them, invisible but real. If he crossed too far, the bear would react. If he didn't, the child might not move. The wind sighed through the trees, scattering fine crystals across the clearing. The bear shifted its weight, one massive paw in the snow, claws like curved knives. Then it did something Walter didn't expect. It stepped aside. Just a single step, opening a space between its bulk and the trees. The child hesitated, then took one trembling step forward. The bear didn't block them. Didn't chase. Just watched. Walter's chest ached with the effort of holding still. Whatever this was, it wasn't an attack. It was permission. And it meant the final move was his. The first light of dawn spilled over the forest, soft and gold, melting the edges of the night's fear. Snow glittered like crushed glass. The storm had passed, leaving a world hushed and still. Walter stood at the edge of the clearing, his coat heavy with frost. The child was safe now, wrapped in a blanket he'd brought from his cabin. They clung to him, their small hand curled in the fabric of his sleeve. The bear was still there. It sat a short distance away, massive and quiet, as if it had appointed itself guardian until the sun returned. Its fur caught the light in shifting shades of brown and silver. Steam drifted from its breath, rising in lazy plumes. Walter didn't move for a long time. He just looked. The bear's eyes were steady, dark pools that seemed to hold something more than instinct, something like recognition. Walter remembered the cubs he had once fed by the fire, the way their tiny paws had pattered across his floorboards. Those cubs had wandered back into the wild seasons ago. But maybe, he thought, they hadn't forgotten. The bear rose slowly, each movement deliberate. It turned toward the tree line, pausing once to look back. No growl. No threat. Just acknowledgement. Then it disappeared into the pines, snow swallowing the sound of its steps. Walter exhaled. He hadn't realized until then that he'd been holding his breath. They began the slow walk home, his boots crunching in the frost. The child glanced over their shoulder more than once, searching the shadows where the bear had gone. Back at the cabin, Walter stoked the fire and poured steaming cocoa into a mug, the simple act filling the room with warmth. Outside, the forest lay vast and untamed, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel entirely alone in it. Because somewhere out there, a bear still remembered. And in its own way, it had stayed with him until morning.